Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first lecture of this detailed Selenium course. Before we get started with the actual Selenium training, the very first thing that comes is what exactly is Selenium? So, what is Selenium? If I talk about I've asked this question to many students, and most of the time, the answer that I got is that it's an automation testing tool and it's used for web based application testing, right? Web-based application testing, as in what all sort of testing that we do manually or using automation, is like we perform testing on web-based applications, we perform testing on desktop-based applications, we perform testing on database applications, we perform testing on mobile applications, then we also perform testing on web services, that is REST or SOAP. So majorly REST is used in the market, right? So these are the areas where we mostly perform testing. We do manual testing as well as we do automation on these applications, right? So if I talk about web-based testing, let's say we are saying that Selenium is only for web-based applications testing. So it's a automation testing tool for web-based application testing only, right? So this is only for web-based. Now, there are other many tools available in the market for web-based testing, as in not just Selenium. There's the biggest competitor of Selenium, which I believe everyone knows, that QTP or UFT, right? So QTP, which is known as UFT these days. So prior to Selenium, the demand of QTP was like anything in the market, right? There were a lot of openings. Many companies were working on QTP for their automation stuff. And slowly and steadily these days, we have seen that many organizations are leaving QTP and moving towards Selenium, right? And now 90% of the market, if we compare it with Selenium and QTP, 90% of the market is working on Selenium. Many big organizations are working on Selenium. It's not just like small scale companies are working on Selenium. There are CMM 5 level companies, Google, Adobe, Facebook. Many big brands are actually working with Selenium, right? They're using Selenium for their automation testing, right? So QTP, it supports web based and it supports desktop based as well, whereas Selenium, it supports only and only web based. Then why the market is moving towards Selenium? Why not QTP? Why not RFT? There are n number of other automation tools in the market. So the best part of Selenium is that there is no license required to work on Selenium. It's completely open source, right? Open source means that you need not to pay even a single penny to use Selenium. Whereas for QTP, there is a very expensive license. It costs somewhere around 2,000 to 4,000 USD per user. And if a company is going for a concurrent license of, let's say, 50 users, it will going to cost a huge amount. Whereas the same functionality Selenium provides absolutely free of cost. Just that Selenium does not support desktop. Selenium can only automate web-based applications. But if we talk about current market, 75% of the projects are currently accessed via URL. Yes, because it's a time of cloud computing. So everything is on web, right? So Selenium is one of the best automation tool for web-based application testing, right? Not just this, not just open source. There are many other open source automation tools available for web-based testing, like what it is there, OpenST is there, n number of open source automation tools are there. But why Selenium is very popular? So that is what we will be understanding in next few lectures, right? Then for database application testing, there are many vendors like SQL, MySQL, Oracle, right? You can perform queries through this. Big data is there, Hadoop is there, right? You can write SQL queries, you can validate the data manually. Then for mobile applications as well, there are tools like Robotium is there, Calabash is there, then something called as Appium. Now what Appium is, we may going to discuss about this thing as well. And same way for web services testing, there are tools like Postman is there, Soap UI is there, right? N number of tools available to perform manual or automation testing on web services as well. But Selenium, it only comes at web-based level. Still, the market of Selenium is very huge. Right. So what exactly is the reason behind it? Before that, we'll first talk about a little bit features of Selenium. So if you are familiar, if you have gone through some theory over the internet about Selenium, some brief history over Selenium. So Selenium, it actually supports multiple browser. So multiple browser support is there. Multiple browser as in, since Selenium is only for web-based testing, so things will be executed on web only, right? So all major browsers in the world are supported by Selenium. So be it IE, be it Chrome, be it Firefox, be it Safari, be it Opera, all major browsers are supported by Selenium. Along with the browsers, Selenium support multiple languages as well. Languages as in you can use Selenium with Java, with C Sharp, with Ruby, with Python, with PHP, with JavaScript. All major languages in the world are supported by Selenium. Not just scripting languages, purely object-oriented languages are also supported. Right? If we talk about QTP, like QTP as a competitor of Selenium, right? So QTP, which language QTP supports? We know that QTP majorly supports VBScript. So that's just a scripting language, not purely object oriented. And if we talk about VBScript, then VBScript is a Microsoft component, right? So VBScript is only and only supported on Windows. So it means if you are working on QTP, your automation is restricted only and only on Windows. Right. Whereas if we talk about current market, there are many people who are working on a MacBook or working on Linux machines and different operating system. But if we talk about QTP, it only works on Windows. So at times the client requirement is like the client want to test his application on all major platforms. He wants that his product should work fine on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, on iOS, on Solaris, on Android. All major operating systems should support his project, right? So whereas if we talk about QTP, we can only test it on like Windows. We cannot perform testing on different platform. But on the other end, if we talk about Selenium, we have just seen that how many languages Selenium supports, right? If we just talk about Java, Java is one of the powerful language, one of the open source language. And if you have ever installed Java, the very first message you're going to see that is 3 billion devices runs on Java. So be it Linux, be it Solaris, be it Android, iOS, any operating system you name, it is supported by Java. And if you are writing your Selenium code or Selenium automation scripts in Java, you can execute that code in any operating system that you want, and that too completely free of cost, right? So this is another thing about Selenium, is that it has got a multi OS, as in the multi-platform support. You can execute your code on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, on Solaris, on iOS, on Android. All major operating systems are supported by Selenium. Right? This is one of the best thing to use Selenium. Right? Now, if I am talking about language support doesn't mean that like if my application is built up in Java, then I'm going to automate things using Selenium with Java. Then again, if my application is built up in Python, then I'll learn Selenium with Python. And if it is Ruby, then I'll learn Selenium with Ruby. It doesn't mean that whichever language is supported by Selenium, if you are automating your website which is built up in Java, you'll be learning Selenium with Java from scratch. And then if it is built up in Python, you'll be learning Selenium with Python from scratch. So Selenium is not language dependent. Your automation is not language dependent. Language support means that initially Selenium was started in Java, right? If I talk about the brief history of this project, then the very first thing we should be looking at is the main website of Selenium. So that is seleniumhq.org. So this is the main website of Selenium. That is Selenium headquarters. So what is Selenium? Selenium automates browsers. That's it. Selenium is only and only for web-based testing. Anything and everything available on a web can be easily automated using Selenium, right? If I go to this documentation part, this is very important to know the brief history of this project. So like if I talk about QTP, initially QTP was owned by a company called as Mercury. So Mercury came up with QTP in the market, and then later on HP has taken over it. Same way, if I talk about Selenium, so Selenium first came into the life in 2004 by a developer called as Jason Huggins, who used to work at ThoughtWorks. So he's the one who actually designed this project. And initially he started Selenium as a Java project. So if you go to this link, this brief history, you're going to see that Selenium first came into the life in 2004 by a developer Jason Huggins at ThoughtWorks. So in order to automate his daily routine task, he has created a small Java project. That project went up to such an extent they thought of giving it some name. And they came up with a name called as Selenium. Now, why only Selenium? There is a history behind this thing as well. There's a history behind the name as well. So if we talk about, we talked about QTP. QTP was initially a product of Mercury. So in 2004, Mercury was actually the owner of QTP. Now, if we talk about Mercury in general terms, what exactly is Mercury? So I believe most of you have seen Mercury, where it's in thermometer, right? So mercury is basically a poisonous element, right? If someone intakes mercury, then he'll die. So if someone intakes mercury, we give him an antidote. That is what selenium is. So selenium is basically an antidote to mercury. Selenium kills mercury. That is the reason they have given this project name as Selenium, so to end the market of QTP mercury. And up to such an extent, they are successful as well. Not just because of the cost, there are n number of factors behind it. And that is what we are going to study in this course, right? So the very first two components that they came up in the market is Selenium RC and Selenium IDE. This was launched with the version Selenium 1.0. So Selenium 1.0 was the combination of IDE plus RC. Now, how many versions of Selenium are there? After 1.0, 2.0 came into the market. After 2.0, Selenium 3.0 came into the market. So current version of Selenium, if you look over here, if you go to this download, the current version of Selenium is 3.14.59. So this is the current version, in which 3 is the release number, 141.59 is the build number. So what is Selenium 3? Selenium 3 is nothing, it is WebDriver only. Right, if you talk about, there are 4 components of Selenium. One is IDE, one is RC, one is WebDriver, and one is grid. So these are the four components of Selenium, in which one was IDRC, 3.0 is WebDriver, and 2.0 was also WebDriver. Plus, there was some support of RC as well. So you can say 2.0 was a combination of WebDriver plus RC. And the last version of this release was 2.53.1. So this was the last version of this release. And then 3.0 came into the market. So 3.0 is only and only WebDriver plus W3C specifications implemented. So W3C is basically World Wide Web Consortium, right? There are some guidelines. We'll be talking about this thing as well. So these are some of the components of Selenium. So we're going to have a detailed discussion around all these components in the course, but our major focus will be on Selenium 3, because that is what the market is currently working on, right? RC is already gone from the market. IDE is still there, and plus there is one component, that is grid 1, which was actually there with all the versions of Selenium. So grid 2 was there with Selenium 2, grid 3 is there with Selenium 3. Now what grid is, this is one of the unique component which is actually used for parallel execution of test cases on remote browsers or remote machines, like remote operating system. So what is grid? We'll be having a detailed discussion around this as well, right? But initially, I mean, the major part of Selenium is when it was initially started, it was started as a Java project. Now, we were talking about multi-language support. So multi-language support means that initially when Selenium came into the market with the Java component, now there are many developers who jumped in initially to use Selenium in order to automate their tasks, in order to automate their projects. Now, everyone is not from the Java background, right? There are some C# developers as well. There are some Python, Ruby developers as well. So now, in order to work on Selenium, since initially Selenium was supported or started in Java, right? So everyone is not from the Java background, right? Everyone is not familiar with Java. So if let's say I am coming from a C# background, I need to learn Java in order to work on Selenium. Similarly, if I am coming from Ruby background, then again I need to learn Java. So what they have done is they have migrated the entire source code from Java to C# and to Ruby and to Python and to all different languages. Right. So this is what multi-language support is there. That Selenium is available in all major languages. So no matter whichever background that you're coming from, if you're coming from Python, there is no need to learn Java. You can simply start with Selenium with Python. If you're coming from a Ruby background, no need to learn Java. You can start Selenium with Ruby. You can start Selenium with C#. So that is what multi-language support is there, right? So if I talk about Java, Selenium is available in a form of a jar file in Java. Since and again, if I talk about C#, so in C#, Selenium is available in a form of a DLL file. If I talk about Ruby, Selenium is available in a form of a gem file. Same way, Python, PHP, JavaScript, for all major languages, the bindings of Selenium is there, right? But the major thing about Selenium is that it is not a tool. Yes, Selenium is not a tool. So if Selenium is not a tool, then what exactly is Selenium? We can call Selenium as a framework. We can call Selenium as set of libraries, a project, or we can also call it as an API. Yes, Selenium is also called as an API. Now, when I'm talking about API, don't just relate it with REST APIs or SOAP APIs. API, it's a huge term. Now, what exactly is an API? Right, before we get started with Selenium, the very first thing that we need to understand is what exactly is an API, right? Because Selenium itself is an API. So, in the next lecture, we'll be discussing about what is an API, right? And then we're going to see how Selenium is actually built and how we going to use Selenium in our automation project, right? Thank you.